What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the podcast. My name is Kyle Moore, and this is Life's Rock, the podcast for myself, and on the audio version of the podcast, the voice of my mental health. Explore the world of mental health through casual and open conversations with really amazing people, and this week is by no means an exception to that. Before we get into the guest and all of her experiences and what the conversation is about today, just wanted to remind you guys about a few things concerning the podcast. First of all, if you guys are looking for any kind of like podcast merch, anything affiliated with Life's Rec Media and Life's Rec the podcast as a whole, you can go over to www.bettertomorrow.world, and that's where you can buy all of our hats, stickers, posters, and any future drops that we do, which hopefully there's some things coming up soon, so we'll start looking forward to that. But with the holiday season right around the corner, it's an amazing opportunity to get a gift that means a little bit more than just a gift. 50% of our profits always go towards mental health charities and initiatives here in Canada, and it's always nice to have to be able to gift someone the gift of a conversation. And I think that that's what all of our products are meant to do, is inspire conversations that maybe have been kept on the back burner a little bit concerning mental health. So definitely go check that out. And in terms of like partners with the podcast, you guys have probably heard a million times us talk about Tether. Well, guess what? 1,000,001 times, here we go. Tether is this really incredible platform that I've been a part of now for over a year, I believe. Like it's been a while. What it is it's this social media platform that was created for men, by men who are struggling with their mental health, or who want a safe space to communicate with other men who just like get it. They understand what you might be going through, and it's an opportunity to meet some people who are going to be in your corner. And I think that especially when there's a lot of uncertainty and there's a lot of question marks surrounding what you're going through, having that platform, I know for myself, to lean back on and to know that those guys are there for me, and that I can use that space to talk about whatever I want, and that if somebody's been through a similar situation, we can connect, talk things through. And it's amazing. It's community, and there's nothing better than it. So would highly recommend you go over to the Google Play or the App Store today, download Tether, and start connecting, because it's a fantastic platform. I've honestly just got I talked about it on the podcast before. I was such a man crush on these on the guys who started Tether, because it's just like amazing guys, amazing platform, amazing intention behind the platform. So I'll hang my hat on what they're doing all day long. So now getting into the episode, because that's obviously like why we're here. I'm really excited for you guys to hear this one. This week on the podcast, I'm joined by a fellow Ryerson alumni, Taylor Lindsay-Noel. Fantastic individual. Lindsay was a world-ranked national gymnast at the age of 14. She was an Olympic hopeful. She was somebody who competed in athletics at a high level during a time when I was basically, gym class hero. So she was pretty advanced along the athletic timeline, I guess you could say. And at 14, she suffered while she was performing a gymnastics routine, a high bar routine, she suffered a spinal cord injury that left her with partial paralysis throughout her entire body. And that was, you'll hear about in the episode, like that identity of being a world-class gymnast being taken away from her at such a formative age. There was a lot for her in terms of like self-identity and self-love and all of what that would entail, that loss of identity. And then as she progressed through her life, she reevaluated, who she wanted to do. She's a brilliant, fantastic person, and even though one of these areas of her life that meant a lot to her was taken away, she was able to grow into other aspects of her life, and is now a motivational speaker and a podcaster, a fellow podcaster of Tea Time with Tay, which is this really amazing podcast where she sits down with a cup of tea with guests and they talk about life and mental health, and it's fantastic. And then along the way, just as for shits and giggles, she also started a company called Cup of Tay, where she started her own tea company because of the podcast, and was even featured on Oprah's Favorite Things back in 2020. Unbelievable person. In the podcast, we talk about perseverance, we talk about the athletic mindset and how it helped Taylor with her recovery. We just talk about life. Taylor's this really open person who you talk to once and you feel like you've known them your whole life. You can definitely tell, she talked about in the episode that her family is somebody who, like the family is the kind of house where you walk in and you think you're only staying for 5 minutes, and then you end up talking for hours. And I think that Taylor is just a light. And I am so excited to share our conversation with you. So without any more of me blabbering on, let's get into the episode. Taylor, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast. How you doing?
The true honesty of how Taylor is right now. Taylor is a little bit stressed. It's like what we were saying before we started recording, but I'm in the middle of our busy season. It's Christmas. It's tea season. It's cold outside. People are wanting to grab that tea. So we naturally are busier, but especially after the year we've had with the business, it's very overwhelming, but also extremely exciting. And I'm very grateful. So I am trying to get as much sleep as possible, but as you can probably see from under my eyes, not very much.
I can't see it at all. Don't even start.
Thank you. But yeah, I'm genuinely though, I'm good. Like I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's great. I'm really happy to hear that, and we will get into Cup of Tea very much in the episode because what you do with Cup of Tea has been incredible, and how it's become what it is today is such a fascinating, like, unique story, and so definitely we'll be getting into it. I mean, just speaking of, like, with this podcast, I've been really fortunate. You have a podcast yourself, Tea Time with Tay. Tea Time with Tay or Tea Time with Taylor?
Tea Time with Tay.
Okay, I was just making sure. I didn't know if I shortened it in my own head. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's what I had read. And I remember after we did, Taylor and I, for those listening, we did an episode of the Ryerson Alumni Bounce podcast. And that's where I'd heard Taylor's story. We talked all about kind of mental health post-grad and just like truly a fantastic individual, and someone who has inspired me as a podcaster, and so definitely excited to have you here. I think the best place to kind of jump into it is really like almost like chronological. I think it's kind of to start from the beginning, because what a wild ride it's been, but it had to start somewhere, and it's been kind of well documented that as a youth, you were heavily involved in athletics. You were a gymnast, you were on pace. We're talking like Olympics, we're talking best of the world. Like, this is world caliber athletics, and that's fantastic. And then there was a tragic fall that left you with life altering injuries. And I guess my biggest question is just kind of like, after your fall, waking up or being like, what was running through your head? And when all that was going on, you're 14. You were a kid.
I was a baby. I was like so crazy. Like it's been almost 14 years, and I was a little baby. It was very difficult because at first I had no idea really what was going on. I didn't black out after I fell. I fell off the high bar and landed head first. So that was fun. But initially I didn't feel any pain. So it was quite confusing to me why my body wasn't moving. My coach at the time was yelling at me to get up, and I was trying to, but nothing moved. And so in that moment, the only way that I could come to terms with it was that my body must be a little bit stunned, or I'm just so winded I can't move. But as the next few minutes went along and I could not get up, the panic definitely started to sink in. And after going to the hospital and being taken to immediate surgery, it was only really when I woke up out of surgery that I realized, there's something really wrong here. And getting to know, I didn't know what a spinal cord, it's weird because as an athlete, you know a lot about the body, but I knew absolutely nothing about what a spinal cord really did. And the best way I could describe my reaction was, I'm like, to my doctor, I'm like, I guess that was really an important part of the body that I screwed up. And he's like, it's pretty
doctor's like, yeah, that's a good guess.
Yeah, it's a good guess. And I said, okay, crap. Of course I would choose that, not choose, but that. But it was hard because I went from being essentially one of the most independent people you could ever think of. Body wise, I could do things with my body that some people would only dream of ever doing, and going from that to initially needing someone to even just lift my arm or brush my teeth. It was,
I can't imagine.
Difficult. It was really devastating. And it was beyond just me, it was my entire family, my friends, my whole support system. You expect injuries, broken bones, but you never expect this. So it was a lot.
Yeah. When you were going through that process of like, the actual, I've heard from other people that I've interviewed on the podcast or just from my own life who have went through injuries similar to your own, not always exactly, that it's kind of like the stages of grief when you're accepting that this is your new life and that this is like, it's a rebirth in a way, but not one that you were like, oh, I went to therapy, I went to rehab, and now I'm like, this is a new me. Like, it's not like a new year, new me kind of thing. It's like, oh, a split second, and now I wasn't expecting this. Now here it is. Like, what was that process like for you? What was going through your mind as you were like, okay, I got to be a new Taylor. I'm still the old Taylor, but this is a whole new environment that I have to learn.
Absolutely. I definitely went through all of the 7 stages of grief. I know there's like anger, denial, acceptance. There's more, but I'm blanking right now. But I went through it all. Yeah. Initially, I was in complete denial. And when I mean complete denial, about a week after my accident, I remember looking at my friends and saying, hey guys, I know this sucks right now, but when my body gets it back together, when I go back to high school, I'll probably just become like a cheerleader and do something less stressful than gymnastics. Like I was so in that headspace that this is fine. I will work hard. I will train hard. I will go to rehab. Everything will be fine. My body will get back together. And then I can choose to do something less taxing. I was getting to a point in the sport anyway where I was feeling very overwhelmed and stressed and a lot of pressure. It went from being fun to feeling like a job. Right. And that's never something you want.
Especially not at 14 too.
At 14, yeah. The thing that people always they always kind of forget is that the lifespan of a gymnast is
true.
The shortest lifespan probably of almost any sport. Most of us tap out by 22, if not like 20. So at 14, I'm already getting to the point where it's like, I put in years. I only have a few years left to do this. And the pressure was so much. And so I almost saw it as an opportunity when I first was injured. I'm like, oh, I could do something else.
Right.
And then as acceptance started kicking and I realized that I would not be able to do that.
Yeah.
When anger and all the other negative parts of grief start to really take a toll. And it was it was hard to accept.
Sure. Was that mindset of like, okay, a slight pivot and I'm going to get right back to like what I'm going to do. Is that just kind of like innately who you are? The idea of like, even if I'm presented with insurmountable obstacles, I just have to pivot slightly. Like, this is just, one thing, I'll pivot this way. Or was that more of an athlete's mindset?
It's 100%. And I think it's an athlete mindset because the more athletes I talk to it's the same thing we have, whether it be in your work or your life or relationships, anything, we approach, I feel like, life differently. And that's why I was like, in the future, if I am fortunate to have a family, like I still would put my children in sports because I think fundamentally it gave me a drive to do anything to the fullest. I grew up in an environment where every day I walk into the gym, at the back there's this massive sign that said "In the Pursuit of Excellence." And I grew up every day for 9 years seeing that. And it seeps into you.
Absolutely.
So I took rehab as my new gymnastics. I put as much effort into rehab as I did to gymnastics, as I do into my schoolwork, as I do to my career now. So it definitely helped me because I saw the kids who were admitted, who had never worked out a day in their life or never been pushed in that way, really struggle to get through even a basic PT session.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to have that athletic background, I mean, I think that definitely would make it easier. Obviously, you say that with a grain of salt.
I know.
Because it's never going to be easy when you're going in. Yeah, you go into the hospital and you come out and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is different. But yeah, it's I think the idea of like that athlete mentality, I think, helps so many people with the mental health process. Of it is sometimes you do have the odds stacked against you and you seem to be up against an insurmountable obstacle, but at the same time, there is no one path to winning, or there's no one path to mastery. It's like you have to find the way, and sometimes the way will drastically change. But obviously, you went on to do some really really incredible things. One last thing I want to touch on about the grief process. I think that one of my favorite things to talk about with people with the grief process is acceptance, because I think for so many people, acceptance of something so extreme looks so very different. For some people, it might just be the first time I went out, or the first time I went on a date, or the first time I did something. And I'm really curious, like based on your experiences in your life, like what did acceptance look like to you?
Acceptance came very slowly. I feel like the first little bit of acceptance I remember being, what a lot of people don't know about me is that right after my accident, I was in sick kids for 7 weeks and then taken to Bloorview Kids Rehab. I avoided going outside for 3 months. Like, and when I talk about avoiding, whenever, because every single day they would have scheduled time where someone comes around, they take you guys out on the grounds or whatever. I didn't make it past that front door for 3 months, and I was strategic with it. It wasn't even like I would purposely tell one nurse I was going with another nurse, and they would all think that I went out. And I realized now, looking back, I was suffering from a little bit of agoraphobia, but more importantly, I was so going through that front door to that rehab, even on the grounds, was presenting myself differently than I had ever expected. I had always pictured myself entering there and exiting there a completely different person. And the truth is that I entered there in a wheelchair and I left there in a wheelchair. So the first time I went outside, I'm like, it hit me. I'm like, this is life.
Yeah.
And what are we gonna do about it? And I think the second part of acceptance came when I transitioned back to high school, and I was now again presenting myself as someone who entered this school in grade 9 as top level athlete, and was gone for a year and is now back as the quote unquote girl in the wheelchair. But more importantly, I'm like, who am I going to be now that I'm not Taylor the gymnast and I'm just Taylor? And that was like the journey to figuring out who I was.
Yeah, which is huge, especially at such a young age. I remember when I was 14, 15, if you had have said, hey, I need you to basically change your identity, complete 180, I would have completely, had no, I wouldn't have been able to do it, like, straight up. And I think like, I mean, how was it perceived when you got back to school? Like, how did you perceive the whole experience? Because the dynamic between the last time they saw you, national, like, caliber gymnast, and now that being taken away, like, how did you perceive that experience?
People were so the crazy thing is that because I was such a quote unquote super athlete when I went in grade 9, I was in a normal school for the first time, but still there was an extra program called the APGA program, which is the academic program for gifted athletes. So essentially what that meant is that whenever we'd have to travel for weeks at a time, our schoolwork was accommodated. We got to push back exams, all these things. So we were part of a regular school, but people still knew us as the athletes. Right. And that is like 100% who I was. And so when I went away and people heard that I went to rehab, people just automatically assumed that rehab meant I had some kind of like steroid addiction or like a drug addiction or something. Yeah. And so when I came back and I was in a wheelchair, people were like, huh? What happened? And so there was actually, when I first went back to school, there were tons of rumors that I had done something drug-wise, which
my God.
I've never done any hard.
Yeah, let's just add that to the equation, eh?
Yeah, like I've never done any hard drug ever in my life. And people thought that I had some kind of weird complication from something like that. And so having to first tell people, no, that's not what happened. And eventually my school had an assembly actually to explain what happened, which was so embarrassing.
Oh my God.
I gave people a different perspective of what had happened. And from then I was just surrounded by nothing but love and care, and went on to get really involved in school, joining student council.
Yeah, you were student body president the next year?
By my last year, I was student body president.
Not bad.
Yeah, and the first year after going back to school, I was student rep for the school, and yeah, by the last year I was president. So I think that was just such an opportunity to, I love people, I love getting involved, and it helped me find myself and what I wanted to do.
I've got something for you. I think it does kind of tie a little bit into the self-identity grieving process and everything. But just as like I was getting ready for this episode, this was one that I was looking forward to so much, and plugging away through some a little bit of research, and I came across something that you wrote that I know, right? So I don't usually do this kind of stuff. I never do this kind of stuff where I'm like, I would like you to explain this quote from a mindset. But I think this was written about maybe possibly another person or more of a romantic feeling. But when I read it, based on your story, it really made me think of more kind of like inner relationship. And I'll just kind of read it out here, and maybe we can kind of get into it.
Sure.
So you wrote down, here together, but emotionally worlds apart. I've never known such a painful distance. And to me, the idea, I delve into a lot of self-talk on my podcast. I have the personification of my mental health that I co-host this podcast with. And I've interviewed myself on the podcast. Like, self-relationship is something that I've put a ton of work into. Can you explain that quote from a position of like self-identity?
100%. So I actually wrote, oh my God, it's so interesting to hear someone read back your work. Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that one specifically in a really long time. But that, a lot of people who read it, take that as a relationship quote, and something that which I love. Like, I go for it, whatever works for people. But I actually wrote that about myself. In a relationship and emotionally worlds apart, I found myself really disconnected from who I was or who I thought I was going to be. From a very young age, I was just so certain I was going to be that athlete, the Olympian. That was my journey. That's who I was going to be. I was so set in stone about it. And so having what happened to me happen and having to rediscover me as a person, I just didn't know how to connect with myself. I felt like I didn't know who I was anymore. It's like, it was almost like breaking up with yourself, or like a death in my own head. And it was a very difficult thing to come to terms with. And so I just felt like I was emotionally, I'm one person in one body, but I felt like emotionally I was two entirely different people and on two different maps. And so I kind of leaned into the relationship type of quotes, because I know that's what some of my readers like to read, but it really was a personal thing. How did you know that? I'm so curious. How did you know that might have been written about me?
Just the way that it was written. I was going through it, and it was just one that caught my eye, and I was like, here together, but emotionally worlds apart. And I just kind of, I thought it sounded like my own relationship with myself. And that's kind of like, I was thinking, both of us having our own issues with mental health or struggles with mental health throughout our lives. I think that like, it was such a familiar
feeling.
Yeah. Reading it, I was just like, I completely understand that, you are here together. I'm never without my mind. I'm never without my higher self or other self or whatever you'd want to say. But at the same time, I feel like so many times throughout my life, I have been just painfully distant from that person. And it's left me feeling lonely and like I just need someone. And so when I was like looking at that, I was like, based on your experiences, like, I don't think that's about somebody else. Like, I think that's about you. So, I mean, that's really beautiful that, you were able to lean into that. What did leaning into that look like for you? How were you able to rebuild that relationship with yourself?
It took time. It took a lot of time. It was not easy. It was something that did not come overnight. I struggled a lot in the very beginning. I just thought I would never be able to find a time and place where I was just so happy without some sort of external identity. And being just Taylor didn't seem like enough, if that made sense.
Absolutely.
I always was something. Taylor the pianist, Taylor the gymnast, Taylor something. But to just be me and have to navigate the world and life and relationships with people who only knew me for, I guess, my personality and not what I did was very, very strange. I think it probably took me maybe 4 to 6 years to really develop myself as a person. And a lot of that having to be because I was, young, I was a teenager and figuring out life. But I think once I actually hit university in Ryerson, I started to get my stride and really figure out who I wanted to be.
I think the cool, something that I find so interesting about that is the idea that it sounds like a lot of the things that you were known for, a lot of your identity was things that like, you took what I would, truly describe, and I'm not, I never want to come up here and pump anybody's tires by any means, because I just think you're just a fabulous individual as a whole. And I'm sure you've been told it a million times, but, you've had it seems like you've been so special in the way that your mind has been able to do fabulous, wonderful things with your body. Gymnastics, piano, these are all things that take like physical control of the body. But that specialness, that's something that like je ne sais quoi that would have led to all of these like physical things was still like, it all started up here. And so like that never left. And so the idea that you've been able to, I think, show people that you, Taylor, are a fantastic individual and always have been and always will continue to be. Just because you can't show that physically, it doesn't mean anything. Like, and I just think that's really fantastic.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah, of course. No, listen, big fan. But as you were kind of going through this process, you talked to me about how like Tea Time with Tay and those conversations with people started to kind of play a role in that mental recovery and that mental kind of like finding yourself, rebranding that identity of who is Taylor.
Absolutely. When I was in university, I did internships with ET Canada and Global News. And I quickly realized that, I was telling stories that I didn't really want to tell. I was telling other people's stories that may not always interest me. And I thought, do I want to have a lifetime of telling and working for something that doesn't really drive me? And so the podcast space being somewhere that was so emerging and new and fun, not new necessarily, but new to me.
Well, it's still like compared to other mediums, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, yeah. Good. Glad you feel that way too. And I just was like, this is my opportunity to do and tell the stories I want to tell. And the stories I wanted to share were people who I found inspiring, people who have been through some stuff and have come out on the other end. I'm always one to champion a hero story. And by hero, I mean people who truly understand what I believe the essence of life is overcoming instrumentally like devastating situation and still being able to push forward. Those are the people who I find the most strength from.
It's the truest form of human storytelling. David versus Goliath. It's the best.
Exactly. And we all have it. I think a lot of times when people hear my story, they go, I can't even imagine what that'd be like. And I say, my struggle is not any different from someone who has experienced cancer or someone who has had a loved one pass away. For me, I haven't really experienced those things yet in life. And so I don't know what that feels like, but we all have something that we go through. We all have some form of baggage or difficult, quote unquote, baggage or difficult circumstance we work through. Mine just presents as someone who's been in a wheelchair, had a bad accident, but that's no different than someone who has mental health struggles, health issues, family issues. We all go through it. And I think that's where we really connect, where humans really connect.
It's so funny because I think that like so much of life, especially now in this, age of social media and everything, is dedicated to showing how little you suffer. How good is my life? How little do I, it's the highlight reel, right? It's how little do I suffer? But I think that those are always the stories that bring people together so much, because you can't understand the exact pain, but you do understand pain. The hurt of being human. It's everyone's gonna have something. So I know that's my biggest, like what I love about the podcast is being able to have a place. I've always kind of seen it as a kind of like a curator at a museum, where my job isn't necessarily to be the art. This podcast isn't necessarily meant to be the art. It's meant to house the stories of like fantastic individuals who are just human. And I think that's just it's so great, is just to share the stories of people who are people. And I think that, you are no exception to that by any means. So let's get into a little cup of tea. And I was going to, and I apologize because I was literally planning, I was getting all together because I was going to get a cup of tea and be all ready to go for the episode. But surprise, I had my superintendent at my apartment knock, and they're like, "Hey, we're going to go change your countertops." And I was like, yeah, sure. And thankfully they got out of here like 15 minutes before we started recording. So I was like, okay, I'm trying to put my place back together and then hop on here. So I didn't have time. But these conversations that you're having with people over a cup of tea, I mean, like, what does tea mean to you? Like, I think that's just such a funny bonding agent.
People are always like, why tea?
Why tea? Yeah, exactly.
How did you end up? I always say, nobody grows up being like, when you're younger, you're like, I want to be a vet, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a firefighter. No one's like, I want to be a tea lady. Like, it wasn't a dream that I particularly had for myself, but one that totally makes sense now that I'm here. Tea has always been a source of comfort, a sense of home, and a medium that was used to have really great conversations. In my household, my house was always the house that people came to gather. We would sit at our table, our island, and my mom would put on a cup of tea, and we just we call our house like the vortex. Once you come, it's really difficult to leave. Like, you
That's
will be
great.
here.
That's so great.
You think you're coming for 10 minutes, you're here for a couple hours.
Always.
And the conversations that I look back at and that really shaped me as a person. And so when I thought about, I kind of went, I never really realized how much, I guess, of a quote unquote business mindset I had until recently. But when I started my podcast, I was like, okay, we need to have something that'll allow me to be open to sponsors. And that's, as you know, that's the way you make money in a podcast space.
Absolutely.
And so I thought, if I drank tea, had great conversations, it was just natural. Tea time with Tay kind of just flowed. And it was an opportunity to reach out to different tea companies and hopefully work with them. And so as I progressed, I started reaching out to different companies, the most notable being David's Tea.
I was going to ask. Yeah.
Hoping and praying, because I spent thousands of dollars with them every single year, and I was obsessed. Hoping that I always say I would not have started a cup of tea if it sent me like one pack of tea. I would have been like, oh, look at us, we're
oh my gosh.
Like, what do you mean?
Listen, as a struggling podcaster myself, I will say that one little thing would just like, oh my God, yeah, it would make my day.
Yeah, and I mean, I thought I could at least get a bag of tea for free.
Yeah.
I never heard anything back. And
it's crazy. So David T, you fumbled the bag.
You fumbled the bag. You fumbled the bag a little bit, because that was a catalyst where I was like, okay, if they're not going to sponsor me,
God damn it, I'll do it myself.
I'll make this company sponsor myself, and eventually it'll attract other sponsors. And I realized in the process, like, oh, if I do this, it could be like another source of income. This could be something that hopefully makes me money on the side. But as I got more and more into it, I was like, if I'm going to dedicate this much time to it, I'm going to do it and do it well and do it different. And I feel like Cup of Tea really represents a very new feel in a very old space. Tea is one of the oldest businesses you got around. And from what our customers have, the feedback, I think we really have made a small mark in a very big industry. Well,
absolutely.
A big mark in a small.
I was gonna say, don't be calling that a small mark. There's no way.
I think we're making a big mark in a very crowded industry, and I think that's what keeps me excited. And I'm starting to see competitors do some other things too, but I'm just like, hey, that's fine. Like, let's do it. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, who said that athlete mindset doesn't translate over to the business world? My goodness.
Yeah.
What was, I mean, listen, starting a business at any point in your life, incredibly difficult. I've tried to do it. I've been working through it with Life's a Rec, starting Life's a Rec Media, and then the Better Tomorrow with our clothing, and getting everything set up that way. And it is a process for anybody who's out there who's like, oh, I'm going to start a business. Like, get ready to dedicate months, years, like your whole life to this pursuit. How, like, that's already difficult as it is, let alone when you're going, you're in a wheelchair. You have to adjust your life and how you do things and have people around to support you. I mean, like, I would just love to know how that was for you. I don't really have any like specific, like, hey, what was this little thing, but like, just how was that?
I was, when I first had the idea to do this, I was terrified to really say anything to anyone. I had been it's weird. Like, I had the most supportive people in the entire world around me, but it's almost like because they're so incredible, I don't want to let anybody down. So I was like, let me just do this and move in quiet. And if I decide I don't want to do it, no one will ever know. I can bail.
Yeah.
As things started to really come together, I realized that as much as I have all these challenges, I'm so dedicated to the goal. Oh, and also growing up in a sport where I saw a lot of families who had generational wealth, which is not my life, which is not that at all. I was like, this is my opportunity to really create something amazing for not only myself, but my family and hopefully my future family.
Absolutely.
And yeah, when I had that kind of fire lit under me, there's really nothing that stopped me. Every single day, working on it, every single day, staying up until 2-3 o'clock in the morning, even still to this day some days, talking to my manufacturers who might be overseas, working on products and really figuring out how to be different. It's very, very similar to podcasting. It's so hard to be different, but once you find your thing, you just run with it.
Yeah, and you ran with this thing, because how long was the process from the inception of starting the brand to then having the brand basically become like we're talking like the brand becomes like cup of tea. It's not like cup of tea anymore. It's like it's cup of tea.
Yeah, about a year and 3 months.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
I finished university, and then it took a couple of months to travel. I traveled a bit, and then when I got home, I was like, I'm doing this, and just dedicate, because you don't think it would take this long, but it took me time, because I knew I only had one opportunity to launch. Like, you have one opportunity to make a first impression, and I knew our impression had to be big. I wanted to do it around Christmas. We're actually celebrating our 3rd year on 26th.
It's amazing.
So, yeah, it's been the most incredible journey. And so I will say, though, it is the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life. It continues to be. It's very, very challenging.
Do you like having that challenge in your life, though?
I do.
Yeah.
I always feel like a little bit of a masochist. Like, I just it's like, oh, the pain.
Keep putting yourself through this.
Yeah. Let's do it again. And like, I already 100%. Have ideas for like the next like generation of what I want to do with my life. And I already know, I'm like, Taylor, girl, are you not already exhausted? But I'm like, we can do it. But
exactly. It's that continuous push. It's like, yeah, sure. I've been pushing this boulder up a hill for a while, but like, there's another boulder over there that I think I got this one in a good spot. I think I can go over there and start pushing this one too.
Yeah, that's me. And anyone who knows me knows that like this cup of tea is right now, but there are so many things, a lot of things that are actually already in process that are coming down the pipeline for.
Very exciting.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
I'm so excited for you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, creating is just like one of the most amazing things. And I think having done this in the way that we have and growing it to what it is, it makes it a little bit easier for the next thing.
It's the steps in the ladder. I trust me.
My cheeks are hurting from smiling. I
good. That means we're on a good path. I don't think you're gonna stop smiling, because I would really love to hear the Oprah story. I know that it's one of those things that is probably asked every time you hop on anything, but like, what a cool experience. To like, listen, I grew up watching Oprah with my mom as she would cook. And always, every time you heard about Oprah's favorite things, it was always exciting. And it's going on the Christmas list. So give me the story. How did Oprah become involved with Cup of Tea?
Oh my God, in the most incredible way. I had my accident on July 15, 2008. And on July 15, 2020, I wake up to an email from Oprah's team being like, we found you online your products look amazing. We'd like to consider you for the December issue. In my head, I already knew what that meant because I have only subscribed to one magazine my entire life. It's Oprah Magazine. Every single one of our bedrooms and bathrooms in this house has an Oprah Magazine in it. My mom and I, like you, grew up watching Oprah together. And so for them to find my baby company before we even reached 2 years was insane. And it turned into the story, as a lot of people have heard now, know that I thought it was fake, the email at first. So I deleted it. And then
even on the anniversary of the accident, you still thought it was fake? You thought there was no way that this was a sign?
I thought it was a sign, but then I also thought it was a joke. Like, it's like, this is a sick joke.
I was going to say, that's one hell of a sick joke.
It would be, and I mean, in my life, you know, there's tons of crazy sick jokes that happen.
Okay,
so I was like, okay, let's tack this on. Yeah. But it ended up, I deleted it, and then eventually I couldn't get it out of my head, and I talked it over with my mom, and she's just like, call the number. And I called, and it ended up being very real and turned into weeks and months of sending product, really curating and dwindling down what it would look like, creating a product that we didn't have. We didn't have the Cup of Tea Luxe Organic Tea Set, a product on the site at the time. And it's something we created with them and her team. And then eventually I remember the email where I was told to send it to Oprah's house and Gayle King's house, her best friend. And just even getting her address, my email address, I'm like, this has to be illegal. Like, this cannot
absolutely
be normal. But they gave it to me, and I kissed it on the way out. I told the mailman, because I had sent it over DHL, over express delivery.
Yeah.
And I said, guard this with your life, because this is the most important package I've ever sent. And we got the feedback that she loved it.
That's fantastic. I'm just imagining the postman being like, this is a tea set. What are you talking about? This is the most important package.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too, is so it was sent to her home in Santa Barbara, but we couldn't put her name on it because
of course
you don't want her name to be on a thing. And so I was like breathing so heavily. And I remember looking at the tracking for the next 24 hours so intently, but it ended up getting there safely. And
amazing.
When we launched, it's people talk about the Oprah effect. I did not know what to expect. It exceeded expectations. We had orders beyond what I feel like we could even I was so overwhelmed. That's speaking of mental health. I was experiencing the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me at the same time while mentally struggling. I was stressed. I wasn't sleeping. I was exhausted. I was scared. And I actually ended up doing online therapy during the height of everything because I needed it.
And good for you for recognizing that you needed it though, and not saying, oh, I feel like so many people go, once this crazy busy time of my life is over, myself included, I'm guilty for it sometimes as well, where I'll go through a period of a few weeks where I'm like, it's win after win after win, where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm booking great podcast guests. I booked a couple of public speaking events, blah, blah, blah. But then all of a sudden, the actual work kicks in and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed, but I'll just take care of myself once I'm done. And the fact that you did it during, that's amazing.
The foresight for it was only there because of my past experiences. I've seen what happens to my mind when I let myself go and run myself to the ground, and I could get into a very dark space. And I've been there before, and I never, ever, ever want to go back there. And so, even before we launched, I remember having a conversation with myself. I talked to myself a lot, and
as you should. I think everyone should.
I think more people do than they admit, but they never say it. And so I remember saying to myself, this is going to be the most incredible experience of your life, but you need to make sure that you don't lose yourself along the way. And the only way that I could think of really protecting myself was to ensure that I got therapy. And it's hard because I didn't tell anyone. I actually didn't, not even my mom. I didn't say anything. I just did it myself. And it's hard to complain when you feel like this is it's an opportunity of a lifetime. Something like that will likely never happen to me again. And all these people around you being like, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I'm like, who am I to complain that I'm exhausted? Who am I to complain that I'm stressed when this is something people would kill for? But I knew better to know that blessings can also come with a lot of hard times,
Mhm.
and I needed to take care of me, so I did.
That's amazing. That's amazing. How do you take care of yourself now? What kind of stuff do you do for you? Because I mean, and I want to preface this by saying, while you were talking about it, I was kind of thinking, and I was like, you were a high level athlete at 14, went through a traumatic injury and all of the recovery, became a young entrepreneur. All of this happened relatively, in my, just based on my perception, very quickly. And I'm just kind of wondering, like, throughout that time, how did you nourish your own soul? Like, how did you have fun? How did you enjoy life during all of the craziness? And still, how do you do that to this day?
It's definitely changed and developed over time. I've always had an incredibly close-knit friend group. My friends, they're so funny. Like, if they were to hear me, because we rag on each other all the time.
as all good friends do.
But then when I go into these interviews, I'm like, they're so lovely. I'm like, they're the biggest handfuls you'll ever meet. And I've never been so lucky to have the most loyal people in my life. And my friends are like my sisters. They've seen me at the worst moments of my life and stuck by me. And some of them we weren't even overly in contact at the time, but they came back. And that for me is something that is irreplaceable. When I talk about my circle of people, a lot of people will say that their friends are acquaintances with me, but I have actually a very small core people who I trust because they were there before me, before and after. And that is a bond you can't ever replace. And 100%. So they are people, along with my family, who I leaned on significantly. We make it a point pre-pandemic to, especially my friends, we get together like once every week and a half. For now, in our older days, wine and pizza. Before, like, just
lovely.
Yeah, right. And so before, I was just going over to someone's house, but really just making sure my entire thing is actually leaning on the people I love. My support system is everything for me, and we are very consistent on being there for each other. Other things I like are writing. I always say that writing saved me from myself. When I wasn't able to communicate how I felt or what I was going through, I would write. And I really think without writing, I don't know where I would be. And yeah, it's crazy because it's so important to me.
Having that creative outlet is huge. That's what I learned through the podcast. This was my writing. I didn't, I love to write, but I was always, I always loved the power of voice. And when I didn't know how to express what I was going through, I figured, well, I'll just turn a mic on and see if something comes out. And then, and it just kind of like, it feels good. And then it was just like, oh, this makes me feel good. I'm going to keep doing it. Yada, yada, yada. Here we are.
That's how I started my podcast. Actually, I have video diaries that I keep vaulted and locked under security.
Of course, naturally.
I would do these video diaries on my photo booth and just cry and talk it out. And then as I got more consistent with it, I'm like, I started liking podcasts, and so I totally understand that.
Just get it all out. Put it somewhere. Get it out of my brain. Put it on something. I
literally hope nobody ever sees those, because they are so embarrassing. Like,
I've probably got some, lost recordings somewhere that I probably wouldn't want to find its way onto Apple Podcasts. Yeah. Taylor, I mean, I really appreciate all of your, openness throughout this whole conversation, and definitely from one Ryerson alum to another. I definitely think that what you're doing is just fantastic, and I think that if anybody's, you just there is something about you that I just think is truly, you're just doing the thing, and I just love to see it.
Yeah.
I love to end my episodes and I'm sure that we will chat again, because this has been fantastic. But I love to end the episodes by asking my guests to put forth a challenge. It is something that my listeners can implement into their day, their week, their month, their life in general, just something that they can do to live a happier, healthier, more fulfilled, purposeful life. And you have obviously had quite the life experience, a roller coaster of life experience for sure. And I was just based on everything that you went through, what is a challenge that you would put forth that maybe you do in your own life to stay in tip top mental shape that you'd like to pass along to my listeners?
I challenge your listeners to choose peace. And what I mean by choose peace, I mean in the mornings where I wake up and I don't feel like doing anything, and again, this probably comes back to my athletic mindset. I think I always choose the hard route for things. I don't necessarily, if I see like a straight road, I'm like, but look at this curly, windy one over here. Like, this looks just so much more fun. And some days it's so much harder to be happy than not. Like, for a long time, most days. And so I would challenge myself to choose happiness today, no matter how hard. Like, find one thing that I have that I can be grateful for and just throw my energy into that one thing. And so for me, sometimes I'd wake up and don't feel like that, like I'm like, oh, I can't move my body, or like my pain levels are so high today from nerve pain. And I'm like, but I have an incredible best friend who I'm going to call in like an hour from now, and she's going to tell me something funny, and I know I can feed into that. And it really does. For me, that helps to change my mindset. I know it's not easy. I know it's not easy, but I try to choose happiness every single day until it becomes a practice that I don't really have to do. And I did that for a very long time. But then I woke up one day and I was like, I didn't really have to try. So choose happiness on the days that are hard and lean into even one thing that you know you can be grateful for. Because no matter your circumstance, if you woke up that morning, that is something that someone didn't get the privilege of doing. So even if you're in a depressive state and you're under your blanket for the entire day, that heartbeat means that you were given an opportunity that someone else wasn't. That's something to be grateful for. So yeah, choose peace and choose happiness on the days that are the hardest.
That's so great. And what's a word that you said in there? Practice. Happiness is a practice. Like, it is one of those things, especially, going through mental health struggles. You're not going to just wake up happy. That is the reality of it. It is something that you have to put in work, and it is hard and it is exhausting, but you can teach yourself how to be happy. And I think that the fact that you call it practice, I think that's fantastic. Taylor, I mean, I'll definitely be putting all of the links for everything that you do in the description of this podcast episode. But is there anything in particular that, as we kind of wrap up today, any organizations or any socials that you want to particularly plug right now? By all means, floor is yours.
Absolutely. So you can follow me. The easiest way to find me and follow me, or if you have any questions, you can follow me at Taylor LN. TAYLORLN on Instagram, Twitter. It's all the same. All of those Instagrams lead back to everything. I have all my other links in my bio, but my company is called Cup of Tay. So it's like cup of tea without the A, and you can find us at www.cupoftay.com. If you want to support an incredible organization, an organization that I absolutely love and adore is Spinal Cord Injury Ontario. They do really great things for awareness and research for and rehab for people with spinal cord injuries, and they're very dear and near to my heart.
Amazing. Good
and
stuff.
CAMH.
Oh my, always CAMH. Always CAMH.
Yeah, my company, we also donate to CAMH, one of our products. So support them because they're incredible.
Amazing. Yeah, no, that we were with our first Better Tomorrow drop, we're supporting CMHA in New Brunswick. So that's, hey, I love it. I love it. Taylor, thank you so much. Honestly, really, 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 really thank you. This has been just a blast to talk with you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad we were able to connect, and I'm sure we will find ways to do something again in the future.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will.
Shoot. Life's a wreck.